It appears that we found a working YouTube link now. The first one, something weird was going on with it. There was some audio issues, couldn't hear us. Whatever, just blame Jordan Klein. Next time you see him, go, hey, Jordan Klein, or at Jordan D. Klein on Twitter. How come it is that you messed up the MLB strategy show this morning? Because he did. 11-game slate. We're sponsored by Prize Picks today. Do us a favor as you guys come in, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We got lots of baseball to talk about. And then, of course, there's going to be other content on the YouTube channel. We got basketball, more baseball also later on in the day. Matt, 11-game slate. How you feeling?
Feeling great. The Mets are 13-5. What could be wrong in the world when the Mets are good? It's a great day anytime you wake up and the Mets are at the top of the standings.
Not for me, because I bet on the Braves to win the division this year. Although I was on the Mets to win the division last year, which really fell apart at the end of the year. So there's still a part of me. It's like, hey, we're early going. I've seen the Mets collapse before. Why can't it happen again?
Way early for the Mets.
It's early. There's still more injuries coming to the Mets. That's for sure. There's a lot that's going to happen. We also got, Ronald Acuna is going to be back with the Braves shortly. But let's focus on today's slate. We got a lot of games to hit on, and we're going to start with the Baltimore Orioles against the other New York team, the New York Yankees. Luis Severino on the mound for New York, Jordan Lyles for Baltimore. So Severino, we haven't seen him pitch a whole bunch of innings yet this year, but here's one thing that's looked really promising to me. The stuff is still very much intact despite all the injuries he's dealt with. So he's still throwing upper 90s, touching 100 miles per hour on his fastball. Only $9,200 on DK, $8,300 on FanDuel. Right off the bat, this is a pitcher I'm going to be prioritizing pretty highly. What are you going to do with Severino?
I will be underweight to Severino today. I agree with everything you just said. He looks phenomenal. The average fastball velocity is at 97.3 miles per hour. That's a great sign for him. 2.08 ERA through his first three starts. I just think that the Yankees are going to be extremely cautious with this guy early in the year. He's yet to go more than 5 innings in a start. I think that continues today. So I just don't see a ton of upside with him. The price tag is very fair, especially on FanDuel, but I don't know if he's got the same upside as other pitchers in this price range. And he's going to command more ownership than most of them. So I will be pivoting off Severino to some other players in this area and trying to get some leverage.
So I don't care about innings pitched as much as pitches thrown. And Severino threw 88 pitches last start. So I think the reason he didn't go deeper in the game, it wasn't because he was on some sort of tight restriction. It was just because he wasn't efficient, and he did struggle with walks a little bit in that start. His stuff wasn't quite as pinpoint as it's been in other starts this year. But, 88 pitches, do you really think that they're just going to limit him at 5 innings kind of regardless? Because the pitches are still there.
88 pitches ain't that much. It's not nothing in today's MLB, but yeah, I think he's kind of capped at around 5 or 6 innings tops. But you look at the second start of the year, he was a bit more efficient in that one, and he still went just 5 innings, and he was pitching better in that outing. So, I think that the Yankees should treat him with kid gloves, right? He's had a ton of arm issues, and they have probably the best bullpen in baseball. They've got 7 guys who could be legitimately back-end relievers for a lot of different MLB teams. So I think the Yankees know that the bullpen is one of their strengths, and they're going to play to that. So, yeah, for me, it's an innings and it's a pitch count type of thing. Again, the stuff is great. The matchup's good, but I think that I would rather go to some other arms in this price range.
So at the very least, I think we're a little bit different on Severino here, because I think we're going to start to see him get close to 100 pitches as soon as today. But at the very least, we both agree, no interest in this terrible Orioles offense?
No, absolutely not.
All right. And I don't think we're going to have very much interest in the Orioles starting pitcher either. I know we've got our guy Sean V in the chat pointing out how good the Orioles starters have been lately. But, they also had a series against Oakland, so they have faced some easier offenses. I do not expect Jordan Lyles to be a pitcher that's going to have success in this spot. Last year for Lyles, 19% K rate, 5.4 expected ERA, 1.39 whip. This is a guy who does not have good stuff, doesn't throw hard, generally gets lit up and allows a lot of hard contact. The only question with the Yankees is just going to be, how do we view them relative to ownership? Because they are expected to be a team that's picking up nearly 10% ownership as a stack. Do you like this as a spot to get to the Yankees offense?
I do like the Yankees here. I think that the Yankees still have a bunch of untapped upside. You look at Baseball Savant, they're in the top 1% of the league in barrel percentage, hard hit percentage, exit velocity, expected WOBA, expected batting average. Like, this is a Yankees offense that is making elite contact, and it just has yet to pay off, really. The general narrative as a New Yorker is that the Yankees offense has really struggled to start the year. And they haven't put a ton of runs on the board, but I am expecting that to change just given the quality of contact that they're making. So yes, I will be targeting the Yankees here in this contest.
And then one note, also just pay attention to the weather, because I know that you also live in the area, Matt. Pretty overcast right now. Little bit of drizzles, a little bit of rain. Looks like chance for more rain later on in the day. It's kind of early to know for sure what the weather is going to look like, but this is certainly one spot to keep our eye on and has potential to be a weather concern if that doesn't change or if it gets worse later on in the day. And the next game also, unfortunately, some weather concerns. The Miami Marlins against the Washington Nationals. Once again, rain on the East Coast today, so some of these games are going to potentially have issues. If the game does play, we have a pitching matchup of Sandy Alcantara versus Josiah Gray. Starting with Alcantara, he's a really good pitcher, but generally isn't quite as fantasy friendly as he is in real life, just because 24% K rate last year, solid, but not spectacular. He generally tends to be fairly expensive also. $9,400 on DK for this slate, $9,500 on FanDuel. I like Alcantara as a pitcher, so I don't want to stack against him, but it's hard for me to see all that much upside in paying up for him at this price point. How do you feel about him?
Yeah, it's bizarre, right? Because the guy throws really hard. 97.2 average fastball velocity this season. He was at 98 plus last year, but just not a strikeout guy. He's more of a pitch to contact type of pitcher. And that works for him. He's been pretty good for the past handful of years, but he's not the type of player that you want to pay $9,400 for. So I agree wholeheartedly with your assessment on that situation.
And then what's even weirder on the other side. So I like Josiah Gray as a potential upside prospect. I think he could be good at some point, but he is $8,400 on DraftKings and he is $9,000 on FanDuel. I know it's a matchup against the Marlins, but for me personally, a hard pass on Josiah Gray when he's one of the more expensive pitchers on the slate. Do you feel the same way, or are you looking at the matchup and saying like, hey, I believe in the prospect. I believe that the matchup's easy, so you're willing to take some shots anyway?
Yeah, I'm still taking some shots on Josiah Gray, mainly because of the strikeout upside. He's up over 11 strikeouts per 9 innings to start the year. That's an excellent number for a starting pitcher, and that jives with what we have seen from him in the minor leagues. You know, he had a rough start to his MLB career last season, but in AAA, before he got called up, he was striking out 12 and a half batters per 9 innings, roughly. So I think that this is a guy, he was the number 17 prospect heading into last year per Fangraphs. I'm buying him. I'm buying him while I still can. 8-4 is on the expensive side of what you can expect from him, but it is a good matchup. Again, the weather concerns are an issue, but as long as this game plays and there's no delay, Gray, I think, is a very nice mid-range SP2 option.
The good news is that the only 2 games that we have on this slate with weather concerns, we've talked about them. It's these 2. So it's not like this is going to be every single game where we have to hit on the weather, but I think it was nice just to group them together so that we could just bring up that there are some concerns in this spot. Offense is fairly low total in this game. Only, 7.5 runs. Also, it's juiced towards the under. I don't envision myself getting to either of these offenses really on an 11-game slate with a lot of options and just better spots to go to. Do you like either of the offenses, though?
No, I think this is an under game. Unders have been the rage so far this year. They've just been absolutely crushing. And this is one of my favorite unders on the slate because I think it's 2, really good young pitchers. I think that they can keep these offenses off the board.
Yeah, and then let me pull up. Let's see if this is updated yet. It is not quite yet. I was going to check out our sports bet model, see that all the games for today, but it doesn't look like it's updated just quite yet. I was curious to see if there was any kind of lean there on the over or the under. But if you guys do ever want to check that out, we have props coming soon up on Odd Shopper, and we do have our sports betting model, which has all the totals and spreads for each game. So let's move on to the next one now. Once again, a lot of spots to talk about. So ones that we don't have as much interest in, like the offense there, Miami, Washington, I think we kind of breeze past them. But this is a spot that I think is going to warrant a little bit more attention at our point, because we have the Boston Red Sox against the Toronto Blue Jays. And this is a tough spot to know what to do with Kevin Gausman, because he was so good last year and he's off to a really good start this year. He's a really high strikeout guy. There's been a little bit of volatility to him in the past, but this is also a very difficult matchup against the Boston Red Sox. Personally, I'm probably going to be playing both sides of it. I see Kevin Gausman as being a high upside pitcher, and then also the Red Sox offense only projected for 1% ownership. And it's just something I kind of think has to give. 1% projected ownership for Boston. Gausman's projected for 2% ownership on FanDuel. 16 on DK is also relatively low. There's a lot of upside on both sides. I'm going to be playing a lot of this for tournaments for that reason. What are you going to be doing with Gausman in the Red Sox offense?
I absolutely love Gausman here. The advanced metrics suggest that this guy has been unbelievable to start the year. He has just gotten extremely unlucky. He's got a BABIP right now of over 400, and he still has managed to post a sub-3 ERA. So you look at the FIP, it's down at 0.71. The XFIP is at 1.82. I was definitely a bit concerned about Gausman moving from, a very pitcher-friendly park in San Francisco over to Toronto. I thought that there could be some regression coming for him, but he has looked every bit as good as he did last year. He dominated the Red Sox in their last outing, 8 strikeouts over 8 innings. To me, this guy has the highest, or the second highest ceiling on the slate, easily the highest ceiling in this tier of pitcher. I vastly prefer him to Luis Severino at a lower price tag and at lower projected ownership.
Yeah, I think both of them are good options. I like Gausman a lot too. And it's one thing that helps pitching in a hitter's park, generating swing and misses, because what does it matter if guys aren't putting bat on the ball? Something else also, have you taken note of his walk rate this year?
I have not.
0.0%. 0.0 and a 30.1% strikeout rate. So, he's off to a ridiculously good start from just overall. He's commanding the baseball. He knows where it's going. And that's been an issue for him in the past. There's been times where Gausman's been a little erratic. Not this year. He's striking out everybody, which has been the case over the last 3 years, actually. 2020, 32.2% K rate. Last year, 29.3. This year, 30.1. The Red Sox have a good offense. So once again, I think they're worth getting shares of at 1% ownership, but I really like Gausman also. Are you going to stack the Boston offense at all 1% ownership?
It's tempting, but no, I think with this many teams to choose from, I'll find some other leverage spots. I'm just kind of putting all my eggs in the Gausman basket. And if that comes back to bite me, I can live with it.
Yeah. And it's once again, it's not the highest probability offense on the slate. It's more so that we're getting an offense like the Red Sox with so much firepower projected for 1% ownership. So I'm right on board with you in terms of the upside of Kevin Gausman. On the other side, Nick Pavetta. I don't think Pavetta is a bad pitcher. I am not going to be rostering him against the Toronto Blue Jays offense at all. This offense is going to be one of the more potent offenses in all of baseball this year, but also going to be somewhat popular, projected for 8% ownership as a stack. Do you have any interest in Pavetta, and are you going to be stacking against him?
Yeah, no, I can't get behind Pavetta when you look at the results so far this season. Just been an absolute disaster, and the advanced metrics say that it's been every bit deserved, his struggles, right? He's got a 10.03 ERA. He's got an xERA of nearly 16. So I want nothing to do with him against a potent Blue Jays offense. If anything, I could see myself using the Blue Jays bats, even though they figure to be one of the more popular targets on the slate.
Yeah, and let's see, where are they in terms of ownership share? We've got, there's a lot of teams grouped together. The Dodgers, who we'll talk about later, are the most chalky offense by a country mile on this slate, and then the Blue Jays are kind of grouped into with a bunch of teams in the next tier. So just for reference here, the Dodgers as a team project for 26% ownership. Astros, 8% Yankees, 8% Royals, 8% Blue Jays. So it's these groups of teams that are all together. And then it's just the Dodgers who are projected for way more ownership. So it's not massively concerning ownership on the Blue Jays. I do think this is a team worth having shares of. Are you going to be avoiding Nick Pavetta, even though he is a pitcher with some strikeout upside?
Yeah, again, the strikeout upside hasn't been there, at least so far this season. And, he's been right around 8 strikeouts per 9 innings for his career. That's good, but it's, that's kind of average for a major league starter these days. So I don't see it in this spot. If it was a better opponent, perhaps, but I just not so much against the Blue Jays.
All right, so let's talk about a really terrible pitcher now, Daniel Lynch, who at one point was one of the better pitching prospects in baseball. Last year, actually coming into the year, I think he was considered one of the better prospects overall in the Royals organization. It meant shit once he came up to the big leagues. He had a 5.69 ERA, 6.35 expected ERA. I guess the stuff is good enough, but what does it matter if the results aren't there? And by the way, even in the minor leagues last year, he was a train wreck. He had a 5.84 ERA and a 4.57 FIP in the minor leagues. I'm going to be stacking up the White Sox against him pretty heavily. This is going to be one of my more rostered offenses. I just do not think that Daniel Lynch is a major league caliber pitcher right now. Are you on the same page as me?
Yeah, it's hard to see what the scouts were so in love with this guy. I mean, I guess he was kind of good at rookie ball, but since then, the numbers have been really uninspiring. You mentioned the struggles in AAA. He's shown no ability to pitch yet at the major league level. Not a particularly good strikeout arm. So I'm curious why this guy was considered, a top 100 prospect in baseball. So, getting on some White Sox seems like a pretty good idea to me.
Yeah, and the minor league numbers were never even that good. It's not like he was striking out a ton of guys in the minor leagues. I mean, I guess when he was in rookie ball in 2018, but even then, rookie ball in 2019, he wasn't really blowing guys away. Then A ball, he was okay, but not spectacular. Then his AAA numbers were absolutely horrific. So I'm in agreement with you, and not that you and I are professional scouts by any means. And I know that pitchers tend to fail a lot. I've seen absolutely nothing from Lynch that inspires any kind of confidence. On the other side, Dallas Keuchel. And here's what I did with Kykel for a really long time. I didn't really like to roster him in DFS because he's never been a high strikeout pitcher, but I never really like to stack against him either because he's such a good ground ball pitcher and also a guy that kind of limited the damage against him. But last year, he had a 6.15 ERA, a 6.15 expected ERA, a 13.2% strikeout rate. So we've gotten to a point where the strikeout rate has dipped just enough and he's allowing just enough hard contact that Kykel is not really viable as a big league pitcher at this point. So the other question then just becomes the Royals. Are you willing to stack them, or do you still think there's enough ground ball stuff in Kykel that kind of limits the upside of opposing offenses?
Yeah, the ground ball rate remains pretty strong with Kykel. He was at like 55% last year. He's up at almost 60% to start this year. But the big difference is that he is allowing a ton of home runs. I mean, he's at 3. And we're talking a small sample size here. He's pitched just 6 innings this season, but he's allowed 2 homers in those six innings. He has a 40% home run to fly ball rate. We don't expect that to continue for the full season, obviously, but he's now allowing, some of the limited fly balls that he does allow to turn into home runs. So I do think that there is some upside to stacking against Kykel. I just don't think that this Royals offense really has enough power to justify it.
Here's one other thing that's kind of a concern when it comes with Kykel is that he's good at holding runners on. And a lot of the upside in the Royals does also happen to come from stolen bases. So I do think that this is a good spot for the Royals in general, just because Kykel is so bad. But individually, I'm not sure I'm going to be getting to that many Royals just because of what their ownership is and some of the data in our top stacks tool, where before I mentioned that there's all these teams that are projected for similar ownership. The Astros, the Yankees, the Royals, the Blue Jays, the White Sox. Well, of those teams, they're all projected with a 7 to 10% chance to be the top scoring team on the slate, except for one, and that's the Royals at 4.6%. So once again, I don't think this is a bad spot for them, but the top stack still indicates this is one of the more over-owned offenses on the slate. So I'd rather go to those other teams that are kind of in the same tier. It's an 11-game slate. We can't stack anybody. This is a team that I think is going to kind of fall by the wayside for me. If you guys want access to some of the tools that we're talking about right here, you get an Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95. It'll get you access to not just our baseball tools, but basketball, pretty much every single DFS sport out there. But if you're only looking to play baseball and you're just looking for a cheaper package to get in weekly, we do have packages as low as $4.95 to get you in the door and check out some of our tools. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. Let's hit on this next game now. Braves and Cubs. Marcus Strowman on the mound for the Cubs, Max Fried for the Braves. These are two really similar pitchers to me in terms of guys that are going to limit hard contact. They're going to generate some ground balls, but they're also not going to strike out a whole bunch of guys. There are a lot of pitchers on this list that I do think are kind of like that mid up tier with some strikeout upside. But do you see yourself getting to Fried or Strowman much? Because I don't think, at least for Fried, we'll talk about them differently because Fried is so much more expensive than Strowman. But first for Fried, I don't really like this spot for him that much just because the Cubs offense has, number one, been better than expected. And then number two, Fried is somewhat popular, expensive, and I just think there's higher upside guys like Gausman and Severino we've already talked about.
Yeah, and I do like Fried as a pitcher for what it's worth. I was on him in his last start against the Dodgers, and that worked out pretty well. But this is a completely different situation where he's now going to be a bit more popular. He's a bit more expensive. And as you mentioned, the Cubs offense, they've been much better than expected. They only have the seventh lowest strikeout rate against left-handers to start the year, and they're ninth in WRC plus. I would not expect them to finish the year in those areas, but it just doesn't seem like this is a great matchup for Fried at the moment. So considering the price tag, I will be probably underweight on him, but I'll have a bit of exposure as well.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing too is when the Cubs signed Seiya Suzuki, I mean, there was an expectation that, all right, it seems like he's a pretty good hitter coming over, but I mean, he's at least as of now one of the best hitters in all of baseball, which was something that was unforeseen in the offseason. But he's really quickly gone from like plus 350 to win Rookie of the Year to I think like minus 160 last I looked. So, I mean, Suzuki has been a major boost to the Cubs offense and one of the reasons that it's been much better than expected. So Fried, lower priority pitching option, but I don't really want to stack the Cubs against him either. Now let's talk about Marcus Strowman, who I think there's a lot of concerns generally about his upside also. Just being a ground ball pitcher doesn't generate a lot of strikeouts, but he is $5,900 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, Marcus Strowman is $6,800. There's not really that much ownership going to him. Is he cheap enough that you're willing to roster him even in a really difficult matchup on the road against Atlanta?
Yes, he is. He's cheap enough. He's gotten off to a terrible start in terms of traditional ERA, but a lot of his, more advanced metrics suggest he's basically been the same pitcher he's always been, right? He's got a 4.36 xERA this year. He was at 4.3 last year. The big difference is he's allowed a ton of hits, right? Batting average on balls in play is up to 333. That would be the worst mark of his career. And his home run rate is at 30%. That would also be the worst mark of his career. So I think he's due for some positive regression in those departments. And he's also displayed more strikeout upside this season than he has in the past, 9.45 Ks per 9 innings. I would expect that to come back to the pack as the other numbers do, right? If he gets more outs on balls in play, then he doesn't need to strike out as many batters. But I do think that Strowman in general is just a better pitcher than this current price tag indicates. So I will take some shots on him against the Braves. Right now, our top pitcher tool gives him roughly a 20% chance of being a top 2 value on DraftKings. Only one pitcher has a higher mark, and that pitcher is projected for more than 30% ownership. Strowman is projected for 3.5%.
The other thing, too, with Strowman is if you absolutely are in dire need of saving money on DraftKings today, here are the pitchers that are priced below 6K. Marcus Strowman against the Braves, Jordan Lyles against the Yankees, and what was the other one? And Zach Davies against the Dodgers. Massive difference in terms of the quality of pitchers we're talking about. And is Strowman off to a bad start this year? For sure. He is an ERA over 8, but he's been a good starting pitcher for so long now. we've got a track record on him. He's a 3.7 career ERA, 3.64 career FIP. And if you look at his projections for this year, Zips still projects him as a guy who's going to have a 3.77 ERA. So I don't have too many concerns about Strowman going forward. This is a pretty good buy low price for him. Is this going to be the spot that he for sure comes back to the meet against the Braves? Maybe not. It's a tough matchup, but I'm going to take shots on Strowman at 5,900. I doubt he's going to be this price again. But do you have any interest in the Braves as an offense due to some of the struggles of Strowman to this point?
I would say that the Braves are a team I will be underweight on. I might have a couple of stacks here and there, but Strowman, again, historically has just been not the type of pitcher that you want to attack in DFS. High ground ball rate, can typically keep the ball in the ballpark. Those are things that don't bode for fantasy success for opposing offenses. So I think that the play here is to expect a bit of progression from Strowman, which makes me not all that interested in the Braves offense.
I would like the idea of if somebody's overperforming and we expect them to get worse, they regress to the mean. But I also like you saying that the progress to the mean, get some progression to the mean, because I know that technically it's all supposed to be called regression, but no, that is a negative connotation. So I'm with you. Progression to the mean for Marcus Strowman. And the other thing with the Braves too, if this was a low owned offense, I think I could get behind them, but they're projected to be somewhat popular today. And like you said, Strowman, at least when he's going well, is not a pitcher we typically want to pick on for DFS purposes. The ground ball rate is still there this year. Even with some of the struggles, he's generating ground balls 50% of the time. So Braves, not really that much of an interest in offense for me. Now, we do get to talk about another cheap pitcher who suffers from a whole bunch of bad luck. Eduardo Rodriguez on the road against the Minnesota Twins offense. The Twins offense, it's pretty scary now with Byron Buxton just absolutely smashing at the top of the lineup. If the season ended today, I think Buxton would probably win MVP. But that aside, it's going to totally depend going forward on his health or not. But as for Eduardo Rodriguez, a guy who's consistently underperformed relative to his peripheral stats, he isn't quite as cheap as Strowman, but he's 6,300. The field's getting there in a really big way. You mentioned it before. He is projected for 31% ownership. How do you view Erod and some of his bad luck against the Minnesota Twins?
I think we should start calling Byron Buxton the Masters, because both showing up in April are a tradition unlike any other. Thank you.
Well, at least last year we got the Masters also in the fall, didn't we?
That's
last
true.
year or 2 years ago? We did not get Byron Buxton in the fall because he's typically hurt by then. I have outright bets on him to win MVP. I bet him at, I can't remember now. It was either 40-1 or 50-1 before the season started. It looked really good. Then he got hurt. I was like, well, I knew this was coming. But then he came back a couple days later and he looked great again. That aside, though, Eduardo Rodriguez, you look at his numbers from last year. He did have a 4.74 ERA, but a 3.47 expected ERA. And that's kind of been the case of his entire career. He's always been a guy who, for whatever reason, the talent has not quite matched the ERA. Do you think that we're going to start seeing put it together? Or is this just a guy that's like, hey, it kind of is who he is. He gives up hard contact. He's always going to underperform his peripheral stats.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. I mean, with Boston, he always was like a guy that he had very short leash, right? He was like a 5-inning starter, and it's hard for I think that makes him a little bit more volatile because everything is being looked at over a relatively small sample size. Maybe that'll change with Detroit, but he certainly is going to need to pitch better to make that a realization. His strikeout rate is down. The expected ERA is pretty significantly up. It's more than a full run higher than it was last year. So I get why he is going to be extremely popular today. But again, I think that this is a guy that I will be underweight to the field on. The Twins offense, it's fine. It's, outside of Buxton, they don't have a ton of players that really scare you all that much. And they rank just 16th in WRC plus against left-handed pitchers to start the year. So it's a decent matchup, but I don't see a ton of upside here, I guess, is my issue. Like if he's going to be at 30% ownership, I want him to be a slam dunk type of a value. And I just don't feel that way.
Yeah. So, I mean, points per dollar, I think Erod is one of the best pitching options on the slate, but he is so popular. And you just get to a point where you say, what are the odds of Eduardo Rodriguez being in an optimal lineup today? and it's just not 31%. We have him with the 12% chance to be one of the top 2 scoring pitchers on the slate. And I think there are a lot of pitchers who are just cheap enough that we mentioned, like Gausman's price down, Severino's price down, that Eduardo Rodriguez is going to be in my player pool that I'm going to be underweight, but I'm going to be underweight to him just because he's projected for so much ownership. Now, if it comes out later in the day that he's only going to be 18% owned, totally different situation. But as of right now, with him being 31%, not only do I like being underweight to the field on him, I like stacking up the Twins for leverage because this is a team that's not picking up a lot of ownership. They're going up against a pitch that gives up a lot of hard contact, and he himself is really popular. So I think we should be getting the Twins for leverage here, only project for 2% ownership as a team. I think the spot makes sense, but it's very predicated on Eduardo Rodriguez's ownership being high. Is this a spot that you like getting to for leverage?
For sure. And, you look at this team outside of Byron Buxton and Carlos Correa, just dirt cheap across the board. I mean, Polanco is 3,900. I guess that constitutes as like an average price tag, but every other projected starter for them is 2,700 or less. So this is a really cheap team to stack. Even if you use Buxton, you're still not going to break the bank. So yes, I agree. I think it's a nice contrarian target. I'd also be fine with just using Buxton as a one-off if you were, looking for just a one player to plug in. There aren't a lot of nights where I think you're going to get him at moderate ownership while he's healthy, especially when he's playing as good as he is. But this seems like one of them, right? I mean, I'm seeing projected ownership of around 3 to 5%. That's very reasonable for a guy who is just absolutely on fire right now. So, I like the idea of using, if not the full Twins lineup, then at least Buxton for some leverage.
Buxton stays healthy this year. Does he win MVP?
I think he's the best player in baseball right now. So my answer is yes. But I would put the odds on him playing 140 plus games at like, I don't know, 15%, 10%. It's just not going to happen.
So I'm going to read off some of his games played from recent years. It's not great. It is not great, Matt. 2021, last year, 61 games. 2020, 39 games. 2019, 87 games. 2018, 28 games. 2017, he played a career high 140 games. In 2016, he played 92 games. He has issues staying on the field. Now, when he's on the field, he is an absolute stud at this point in his career. Last year, in 61 games, he was worth 4.1 wins above replacement. This year, in just 10 games, he's produced 1.3 wins. I'm with you. I think we're at a point now where he is the most valuable player in baseball. But unfortunately, that's only when you're on the field, and part of your value is contingent on you being on the field. But if you look at some of the projection models for him, I mean, they have him playing like 120 games this year and being a 6-win player, which is absolutely ridiculous. So I think we could cash some, or at least I can end up cashing an MVP ticket if he stays healthy, but I don't really think it's all that likely he stays healthy. For DFS purposes, though, we only have to worry about today's individual game, and that's what's nice.
Crazy low. If he's already at over 4 wins in 20 some odd games and they only have him projected for 6 and 120, that's just a bad projection.
I mean, he's not going to keep up this pace.
No, but I think if he plays 120 games, he's probably closer to an 8-win player.
I mean, but then it's like Trout territory. Could be, though. I mean, he's been that good. He's a 296.
There's not a single area of the game where he doesn't dominate. He's arguably the best defender in baseball. He's an elite base runner. And now that his bat is, just electric, I think I'm not going to say he's better than Mike Trout because Mike Trout has just done it for so long. But if he stays healthy, it wouldn't shock me if he puts up better numbers than him.
Yeah. 296 WRC plus this year, 169 last year. Could be the case. Who do you think is more likely to stay this year, Trout or Buxton?
Vlad Guerrero Jr. That's my pick to stay healthy.
I mean, I think there's a much better chance of him staying healthy, particularly the position he plays compared to Trout or Buxton. But we can move on now to the other part of this game. Chris Paddock is going to be on the mound for the Twins. Another guy who, Chris Paddock's rookie year, Do you remember how good he was? Where we were not like you and I, but just in general, people were like, "Oh, would you rather have Pete Alonso? Would you rather have Chris Paddock? Who should be Rookie of the Year?" Ultimately, the Padres ended up shutting him down, and then there was just no chance for Paddock to win Rookie of the Year. But ever since that year, he has just progressively gotten worse and worse. And it's not that he doesn't belong at the big league level, but he is just so far removed from who he was in that rookie season. He doesn't generate strikeouts at the same rate anymore. Last year, he had a 5.07 ERA, 4.69 expected ERA. This year, it's only 9 innings, so the peripheral stats look better with a 1.95 expected ERA. But I just don't really know what to make of Chris Paddock. My feeling here is that I don't really want exposure to him or the Tigers, but do you see Chris Paddock ever regaining the form that he had in his rookie season? And does that make him somebody you're bullish on at all for this year?
So the answer is no. I'm not bullish on him at all for this year. I mean, there was talk even about converting him into a reliever at one point, but I am kind of bullish on him on this slate, right? He's 7K, and he's got one of the best opponent implied team totals on the slate right now. You know, the Tigers are not an offense that is expected to do a ton of damage here. And he's not catching any ownership, right? He's projected for like 7% ownership on DraftKings right now. We don't give him a great chance at finishing as a top 2 pitcher, right around 6%. But I think if you're looking for a value play that's not going to be super chalky, he's kind of the guy, one of the pivots, in my opinion, right? I will take him at 7.3% ownership opposed to Erod on the other side at over 30%.
Yep. I think that from that standpoint makes sense. And then, you know, also if Chris Paddock gets the win and Erod doesn't, there's a little bit of leverage to be had there. More so typically for FanDuel purposes for me than DraftKings. And Erod just not nearly as popular on FanDuel as he is on DK. But once again, if Chris Paddock and the Twins get the win, those are 4 points on DraftKings he is getting that Eduardo Rodriguez isn't. So relative to ownership, I think that there is a case for that. Ultimately, though, I just don't think I'm going to play much of either side here. Are the Tigers a team that you're looking to get to at all as a contrarian offense, projected for 1.3% ownership as a team?
Yeah, not really. You know, the implied team total just isn't high enough for them to provide much leverage, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's sensible. The Tigers offense, it's, you know, I think Torkelson's going to be a really good hitter this year, but then you also have the issue of there's Torkelson and there's Miguel Cabrera. You can only play one first baseman over on DK. FanDuel is a little bit different, but I also, the way the pricing is so soft on FanDuel, I don't think there's a need to roster the Tigers. Probably a team that I'm going to be avoiding. Today's show, sponsored by Prize Picks. If you guys have not signed up at Prize Picks yet, do yourself a favor, sign up using the promo code Awesemo because you'll get a $100 bonus on your first deposit and 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. So go check out Prize Picks, use our promo code, take advantage of some free money. Let's move on here with the New York Mets. Your New York Mets, as you mentioned, rolling as of late. Last night, they weren't able to get to Miles Michaelis, but it wasn't a big deal because they ended up scoring big runs in the later innings against the Cardinals. For today, though, we're not going to have to worry about the Cardinals pitching at all. Jordan Hicks is on the mound. He's likely not going to work deep into the game, more of a bullpen game for the Cardinals. How do you view the Mets offense in what's likely going to be, like I said, a bullpen game for the Cardinals?
Yeah, so the Cardinals do have a very good bullpen. They were second in ERA entering yesterday's contest, second in bullpen ERA. And, you know, the Mets got 5 runs in the 9th inning, all of them unearned. After a Nolan Arenado uncharacteristic fielding error. So
2 errors yesterday for Arenado.
Yeah. So I do still think the Mets provide some leverage here. I mean, they're a team that has just raked to start the year, particularly against right-handed pitchers. I have no problem using them. We have them as a pretty solid leverage play right now in the top stack stool, catching very little ownership, but it's not a spot that I'm like super excited about, right? The Cardinals have a ton of really good relievers, and we will probably see most of them in this game, with the possible exception of Gallegos, who got knocked out of the 9th inning last night. The Mets are also really pricey for what it's worth, right? Like they've got 4 guys now who are 5K plus. So it's not the best spot, but I do think that there is a bit of leverage here with the Mets if you want to go that route.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a pass for me just because for the reasons you said. Jordan Hicks, it's weird. You watch Jordan Hicks throw and you're like, oh my God, this guy could throw like 104 miles per hour. You just couldn't believe that he isn't a high strikeout guy, but he's still a quality pitcher. And the Cardinals have a lot of quality pitchers in their bullpen. And ultimately, that's just what I think. The Mets are going to constantly be facing pitchers that are just better than what most other teams are going to be facing in terms of starting pitching today. Like we talk about some of these other games where even some of the better starting pitchers, like Marcus Strowman, for instance, a guy who had a 4.3 expected ERA last year, almost every single pitcher that's going to be on the mound for the Cardinals is going to have an expected ERA under 4. So I'm not going to have that much interest in the Mets, but I'm also going to have much interest in the Cardinals offense either. Chris Bassett on the mound for New York. I'm not massively high on Chris Bassett. I don't believe in all of his numbers from last year, but once again, I think he's a quality enough pitcher that I'm not dying to stack the Cardinals against. And this game has an extremely low total. It is at 7 runs and it's juiced towards the under last I looked. So this is expected to be one of the, if not the lowest scoring game on the slate. But I also don't like the pitchers. So I don't really like the offenses. I don't like the pitchers. This game's largely probably going to be a pass for me. Is that kind of how you're leaning as well?
No, I like Bassett. I think he's a very interesting tournament pivot. Bassett is coming off a rough start in his last outing. He allowed 5 earned runs over 6 innings, but definition of a fluky outing, right? He had an average exit velocity of just 80 miles an hour. So the Giants made a ton of soft contact, but they still had a 389 BABIP. It was just a lot of bloops and bleeders, and that's how they scored most of their runs. So you look at it, he had a 7.5 ERA, but a 2.86 xFIP. So I'm much higher on him than it sounds like you are over the course of the full year. I think he's a very reliable starting pitcher. He's not going to put up gaudy strikeout numbers, although he has struck out 10 batters per 9 innings to start this season. But I think he's going to pitch deep into games, and that's something that we have to consider in 2022, right? That's one thing about Buck Showalter, too. He is not afraid to push his starters. He's a little bit old school in that regard. We've seen Scherzer now go 7+. Tyler McGill has gone into the 7th inning. So it wouldn't shock me that if Chris Bassett's pitching well here, he could get to 7 innings or so in this spot. The price tag is really why he's not going to catch a ton of ownership today, but I think that's why he's a nice pivot. We have him with the 4th highest chance of being a top 2 pitcher on this slate on DraftKings, but he is going to check in at less than 4% ownership per our projections. That sounds like a really nice pivot to me.
Yeah, certainly going to be low owned, but for me personally, I just don't really totally buy into Chris Bassett and his upside. And it's just such a high price tag for him. I don't want to pay $9,800 for Bassett on DK, $9,900 on FanDuel. I get the ownership's low, but it's probably a spot that I'm going to stay away from unless if one of the early games gets ruled out and I lose like Severino, then I'm looking for other pitchers to roster. That could change it for me. But as of right now, I don't think I'm going to be getting into the offenses or the pitchers in that game. A few games left to talk about. And now the Houston Astros, the Texas Rangers, Jake Odorizzi on the mound for Houston, Taylor Hearn for Texas. Now, as for the Astros offense, we mentioned before a group of teams that are pretty similar in terms of ownership, a tier together, the Astros, the Yankees, the Royals, the Blue Jays, the White Sox. They're all grouped together with similar ownership. Of the teams in this group, the Astros are my favorite to target. I do really like getting to the Astros. I'm going to be overweight to them. They're going to be one of my most stacked teams. I love this offense. I know that some of the hitters have struggled a little bit from the get-go, or at least have struggled relative to expectations. There's so much talent here that I don't really care. I like the Astros today. Do you?
Yeah. I mean, we it seems like every time we do a show, the Astros are facing a left-handed pitcher, and we just get to talk about how nasty the Astros have been against left-handers. And why you shouldn't be afraid to use their left-handed bats in your lineup. And that's exactly how I feel today, right? I mean, Yordan Alvarez, 5,400, no problem with that price tag, even on the wrong side of his splits. Again, Taylor Hearn might last 3 innings here, might last 4 innings, and then you're getting one of the best hitters in baseball at reduced ownership, and he might be facing a right-handed pitcher. So I like this lineup. I think that they're projected for the 2nd highest ownership today, and they still have a positive leverage score in the top stack tool. So sounds like a strong option to me. I'm with you 100%.
All right. There's one that we're definitely on the same page with. Houston Astros against Taylor Hearn. Well, let's do it. And also Houston, a team that I pretty regularly end up with a lot of exposure to. Houston for maybe I just don't have the same bias about them cheating as other people do. And maybe that's something that suppresses their ownership. But I think last year I was probably overweight to the Astros in like 3/4 of their games. And it's kind of been the same so far this year. No interest in Taylor Hearn. And then the other side, Jake Odorizzi. There was a point in time where Odorizzi was decent and he just isn't anymore. So once again, we've got the Houston Astros. I think it's a pretty good spot for them. I think it's a good spot for the Rangers on the other side as well. The total in this game is one of the highest marks on the slate, 9.5 runs and a little bit of juice towards the over. So actually the game with the highest total overall on the slate when that's considered. So I'm going to be liking both the offenses here. The Texas Rangers, the pitching staff sucks, but the offense is better than what it was last year. And Odorizzi, a pitcher who certainly gives up a lot of hard contact, a lot of fly balls. I think he's somebody to pick on. Do you like getting to Texas as another team that's not quite as much ownership as like that Astros Yankees tier, but they're kind of close, but it's a team that's going to be in my player pool.
Yeah, I don't like Texas nearly as much as some of the other teams in this tier that we've been talking about, just because they haven't made a ton of great contact this season. They have a 5.5% barrel rate, which is one of the worst marks in baseball, tied for the second worst mark. So they haven't exactly been squaring the ball up so far to start the season. But you do look at that lineup, and there's plenty of talent to go around there. I don't think Marcus Semien is going to be quite as bad as he's been for the course of the full season. I mean, and he's already started to turn things around. You've got Corey Seeger. Obviously, we know his pedigree. So I think there's some appeal with the Rangers here. But if we were sort of ranking out the teams that are checking in that next group, they would be towards the bottom of that list for me.
Let's see. So looking through, so it's also there's like an ownership gap where we've got the Astros, Yankees, Royals, Blue Jays, White Sox together. I guess we could include the Rangers in that. And if we are, I still like the Yankees more. I like the Astros more. I like KC less, probably Toronto a little bit. They're somewhere towards the middle for me, but I would agree. I like the Astros more. I like the Yankees more, but I think the Rangers are an offense worth getting to. And at the very least, it seems like you're more or less in line with that, at least of them being a team to get to.
Correct. Yes. And I will have no Odorizzi. So
yeah, same with me in terms of no Odorizzi. Now let's move to a couple of interesting pitching options. Cleveland Guardians, Los Angeles Angels. We've got Patrick Sandoval on the mound for Los Angeles, Tristan McKenzie for Cleveland. We've got two guys that are capable of putting up some strikeouts. McKenzie in particular, really high strikeout rate, but also a really difficult matchup, but also against the team that strikes out a ton. McKenzie is totally erratic. There's sometimes you watch McKenzie pitch and be like, oh, this guy is a future ace. Going to be a stud. Really good stuff. Really good arm talent. There's other times you watch him and be like, oh, he has no clue where the ball is going, where it comes out of his hand. All of that considered, where do you stand on McKenzie tonight against the Angels offense?
Yeah, I think he's playable. He's not going to be one of my favorite targets in this range, but he's somebody that I will have some exposure to here. We give him roughly a 9% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, 9.8% chance of being a top 2 value on DraftKings. And he's only checking in with around 4% projected ownership. So I think there's enough there to warrant some exposure. He's got some nice metrics to start the year. As you mentioned, the control is the big issue. And that makes him volatile from start to start. So if he happens to have his good stuff and he can control it today, he could put up a big number. But he could also be get lit up. So this is one of those situations to me, kind of like what you were talking about earlier. I will have some exposure to McKenzie, and I'll also have some exposure to the Angels.
Yeah. And I mean, one other thing about the Angels, other than just the low ownership, some of their young hitters look better this year. Brandon Marsh, yep. Joe Adell looks like he could actually stick in the big leagues. We've always known that he's had talent, and he was one of the top prospects in baseball at one point in time, but he was striking out so much. And I mean, he's still striking out a lot, but now he's also making more hard contact to kind of offset that. So he's a 118 WRC plus this year. If he's going to do that with the power upside, then it makes that, over 30% strikeout rate a little more tenable. So we'll see what happens going forward with Adell's strikeout rate and if he could continue to make hard contact. but at least for fantasy purposes, there's some speed upside, there's some power upside. He is another bat that just makes this offense a little bit more dangerous, same as somebody like Brandon Marsh. So the Angels, once again, low-owned offense that I think is worth getting exposure to. And then a little bit of Tristan McKenzie, too, as just a really highly volatile but upside arm. On the other side, Patrick Sandoval, maybe not quite the same strikeout upside that we see out of Tristan McKenzie, but he's also been another guy that has been solid in recent years. Last year, 25.9% K rate, 3.55 expected ERA. He is good enough that I'm not going to want to roster the Cleveland Guardians offense. Sandoval isn't going to be one of my higher owned pitchers, but he's certainly going to be in my player pool. So I like Sandoval, don't like the Cleveland offense. What do you feel about this matchup?
I just worry that Sandoval isn't going to pitch enough, right? He's had 4 innings in each of his first 2 starts. Maybe they let him go 5 today, but he's been filthy. There's no doubt about it. I just would rather, I think, like, if you look at him at 8,100, you look at Josiah Gray at 8,400. To me, there's much more upside with Gray, and I'm going to get him at lower ownership. So I think Sandoval is a player that I will have, but I will be underweight on.
Yeah, I think we're probably on the same page there. Whereas Sandoval in the mix for me in terms of pitcher I'll have in there, but not a high priority. No interest in Cleveland. If you guys have interest in sports betting, now is a good time to check out our best bets package. You could click below to subscribe to our team of experts that use all different kinds of projection models or just geniuses like Ben Raza. Ben Raza, if you see any sporting event going on anywhere, there's a good chance that Ben is bet on it, whether it's like ping pong, little league baseball, couple kids kicking a can on the street, good chance that Ben has a lean on it. So if you want access to our best bets package, click on the link below in the YouTube description and you could sign up there. The bets have been successful since the time we've launched it. So it is something I think pays for itself. Also, if you want a preview of our best bets package, follow at Awesemo Best Bets on Twitter, where we give out one of our premium bets for free each day. All right, couple games left to talk about here. The next one's going to be a biggie. Los Angeles Dodgers on the road against the Arizona Diamondbacks. The Dodgers have the most ownership on this slate by a mile. They're projected for 26% ownership as a team over on DraftKings, whereas no other team even has double-digit projected ownership. On FanDuel, a little bit less so at 19%, but either way, still going to be really popular. They're also negatively leveraged. So what are you going to do with the Dodgers when they have the highest expected chance of being the highest scoring team on the slate? They're fairly expensive, but they're also super popular. This is a pretty highly negatively leveraged team. So with that in mind, how are you going to approach them in tournaments?
Yeah, I'm not going to have any Dodgers. That's how I play baseball, right? You take a team that is implied for, or that is projected for over 25% ownership, and I'm just not going to play them. I'll pick up some leverage, and yes, there's the highest chance of the Dodgers being the highest scoring offense, right? We give them a 16% chance, but that still means there's an 84% chance that some other team is going to outscore them. So hugely negative leverage score on this slate. They should eat, right? You look at it and they're a great team. They're facing a very exploitable pitcher. They're in Arizona, which is, a pretty hitter friendly park, or at least it used to be. It hasn't quite been as hitter friendly of late, but yes, like in a vacuum, the Dodgers are a great team to target here. But when you factor in the ownership, you just can't play them. That's part of, playing MLB DFS is you're almost never going to have the top team of the day. And you have to kind of get used to that fact.
Yeah, and it's, once again, so negative leverage. I think there are ways to play them. Like, if you're going to roster the Dodgers as a stack, here's where I think you do it, Matt. Marcus Strowman is the pitcher. We talked about Strowman before as being cheap with a little bit of upside, and nobody's rostering him. If you're playing a pitcher that's really different, that's where I think the Dodgers come more into play. But if you're just rostering the Dodgers as a stack and your pitchers are, say, Rodon and Eduardo Rodriguez, that is the chalkiest lineup imaginable today. Like, that is a lineup that no joke is going to be used by like 20% of the field tonight.
Yep.
Eduardo Rodriguez, Carlos Rodon, Dodger stack is going to be the chalk of the slate, to the point where if all of those things go off, the only cashing lineups will be Dodger stacks with Erod and Rodon as the pitchers.
100%. But on those nights, you just you take your L and you move on.
Yeah, and once again, I look at the Dodgers. I'm not going to outright fade them, and I'll be using some of these hitters as one-offs, but I do not think that they are warranted to have a 26% ownership share as a team. That is a massive amount going to one team on an 11-game slate with a lot of options to choose from. But
the one Dodger that I'll have is Cody Bellinger, just because he's still cheap at 3,200, and his Statcast data so far this season suggests that he's kind of back to being the guy that he was. So I will have some of Bellinger, and I could see myself using a bottom of the order stack for the Dodgers. But that's really about it.
Yeah. And then, I mean, I'm certainly not looking to roster Zach Davies against him for any reason. So that's just going to be a write-off. But on the other side, Tony Gonsolin, I think, is a solid starting pitcher. But you've talked about pitchers that were concerned about not going deep into games. Gonsolin's one of them. The Dodgers have been pretty restricted with how much he works into games over the last couple of years. He's good enough. I don't want to roster the Diamondbacks, but Gonsolin's also probably going to be a stay away for me, even though I think he's really good. It just isn't enough work. Is this another pitcher that you're going to be avoiding because of concerns about how deep he goes into games?
Yeah, I might have 10% or so, but you combine the length issues with questionable strikeout upside, and he's not a guy that you can feel very comfortable with.
All right, one game to talk about, and it is the game that has the most popular player on the entire slate, whether it's pitcher or hitter. By far, Carlos Rodon is expected to be in the most lineups. 62% projected ownership on DraftKings, 41% on FanDuel. He's at home. He's in a pitcher-friendly park. He's facing arguably the worst offense in baseball against Oakland. When it comes to chalky offenses, I tend to try to be underweight to the field on them just because there's so much volatility there. I don't feel quite the same when it comes to a pitcher like Rodon in a spot like this. He has been so good to start the year. He was great last year. We've talked about in other shows. I thought Rodon was the best pitcher in the American League last year. 34.6% strikeout rate, 2.66 expected ERA. He's going to be popular. I'm going to be rostering him anyway. Are you going to be doing that as well?
Yes. And I agree with you 100% in terms of philosophy, right? There are times when eating the chalk at pitcher is a good thing. I don't think that I'll have 60% ownership of Rodon, which is what we're projecting him for, but we give him roughly a 40% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on this slate. I think 40% is a very reasonable number to play Rodon at today. The guy was electric when he was pitching in Chicago, and now he's in San Francisco. Something else we've talked about a lot already this season is just how good of a pitcher's park San Francisco is. It literally makes careers for guys. So I love him in this spot. He is easily the best pitching option on this slate. He's a lock for cash games, and he's somebody that you're going to want to have a ton of in tournaments as well. Again, 60% might be too much, but 40 to 50% completely fine with that.
One thing that's funny on the other side, Oakland, they're projected for 1% ownership as a team and still aren't even really positively leveraged because the odds of them being the top scoring team, basically non-existent. The same can't be said for the Giants, though, who I actually like this team, even though they're at home in a pitcher-friendly park quite a bit, because I don't think Dalton Jeffries is particularly good. He struggles to generate swing and misses. And the Giants, I just thought they were going to regress coming into this year. I looked at the opening line. I was like, oh, the Giants are plus money to miss the playoffs. That's something I want to jump on. Already regret it because the offense is not taking a step back from last year. Are they going to be quite the same as they were a year ago? No, I don't think they're going to finish ahead of the Dodgers in the standings, but the Giants are legitimate here. They're projected for less than 1% ownership. We have them with an over 3% chance to be a top stack. This is a contrarian offense that I really can get behind against Dalton Jeffries. Are you going to be doing the same?
Yeah, and the one thing with the Giants last year, at least, was they had tremendous power upside, right? They struck out quite a bit, which you don't see from, most of the top offenses, but they made up for it by being, one of the best isolated power teams in baseball. And now they're facing a pitcher who is like a 5K per 9 guy. So they should put a lot of balls in play against Jeffries. And, at least if you're looking at the past year plus of data, that when the Giants put the ball in play, there's a good chance that they're going to hit one over the fence. Right. And that was even without Jock Peterson, who already, I think, has 6 homers now on the year. Right. So you're adding another guy like Peterson into that lineup. I think the Giants once again will be pretty good from a power perspective. So that's what we're looking for in DFS, especially low owned power. Fire up the Giants. Yeah, I like that call. I'm in on San Fran in this spot.
All right, that is going to do it for us. And closing out with a good spot, getting to Rodon, a pitcher, getting to the Giants offense. I think that all makes sense. Do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, check out all the other content we have today. The MLB Live Before Lock. We've got NBA Deeper Dive, NBA Live Before Lock. Good luck today. Check you guys later. And also, we love you very, very much. Did I screw you up, Tyler? Please say yes.